और डायरेक्ट बैठेंगे तो नहीं बुलाने का।
Jai Hind, everyone. Peace cannot be kept, it can only be achieved by understanding. I am Vijayant Rai, a research scholar at the Malvi Center for Peace Research. I welcome all the distinguished guests, respected faculty members, scholars, and dear participants present here today. It is my great honor my honor to welcome Professor Ajay Kumar Chaturvedi, the Vice Chancellor of BHU. Now, I request Samir Kumar Das, the keynote speaker, to please come up on the stage. Now I request Professor Ashok Kumar Upadhyay, the Dean of Faculty of Social Science, to please come up on the stage. After this, I would like to request Professor Priyankar Upadhyay, the UNESCO Chair for Peace and Intercultural Understanding, to please come up on the stage. And finally, I would like to request the coordinator of MCPR, Professor Manoj Mishra sir, to be on the stage. Now, I request my colleague, senior researcher Samprikta Chatterjee, to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijayan. Hello and good morning, everybody. I welcome all of you to this inaugural session. I would request all the dignitaries to please offer floral tribute to Mahatma, the founder of Banaras Hindu University, and also light the lamp of knowledge. Thank you. I now request everybody to prepare themselves for the Kulgeet. Also, do not clap after the Kulgeet is finished. Thank you. मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्ववेद्या की राजधानी राजधानी मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्ववेद्या की राजधानी राजधानी ये तीन बसी है गंगा के रम्य तट पर ये सर्ववेद्या की राजधानी राजधानी नहीं नहीं है ये ईंट पत्थर है विश्वकर्मा का रचे हैं भव्य मंदिर ये सर्वश्रेष्ठ ये राजधानी राजधानी यहाँ की है की पवित्र शिक्षा की सत्य पहल दिखे हरिश्चंद्र थे यहीं पर ये सत्य शिक्षा की राजधानी राजधानी वेद ईश्वर की सत्यवाणी बने जिन्हें पढ़ के ब्रह्म ज्ञानी हे व्यास जी रचे यहीं पर ये ब्रह्म विद्या की राजधानी राजधानी वो मोक्ष पद को लालवा सुधर्म यहीं पर बोले बोध शंकर ये राज ऋषियों की राजधानी राजधानी सुरम्य धारा करुणासी नहाय जिनमें कर तुलसी भला हो करता का क्यों ना कर ये वाग विद्या की राजधानी राजधानी विविध कला शास्त्र गान गणित प्रतीचि प्राची का मेल सुंदर ये विश्वविद्या ये राजधानी राजधानी ये माल जी की देश भर ये माल देश भर ये प्रकट हुई नवीन होकर ये कर्म वीरों ये राजधानी राजधानी मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्ववेद्या ये राजधानी राजधानी मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्ववेद्या गिरिराज धानी राज धानी.
Now, I would like to call the coordinator of MCPR BHU, Professor Manoj Mishra sir, for the welcome address. I would like to invite him at the dais.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to this 3-day international conference in peace pedagogies in the era of global uncertainties. When this whole idea was conceived in a center, when Professor Priyankar visited us, but we still thought that this is something may happen. So when I went, so I welcome the chief chief guest of this seminar, Professor Ajit Kumar Chaturvedi, our Honorable Vice Chancellor. When I went to him, he told that I have a engagement, but I want to visit and want to inaugurate this program. So we had to change it from 10:30 to 9:30 to accommodate him because he was so curious to come and visit us. So I welcome him, and he has always been a great support to us. I welcome the keynote speaker of this inaugural session, Professor Samir Kumar Das. As everybody knows, he is one of the most pioneering personalities and academics in the field of peace and conflict studies. He belongs to the Calcutta School of Thought, and I welcome him, Samir Kumar Das. I welcome our former coordinator and UNESCO chair, Professor Priyankar Upadhyay, who has been the force behind this seminar. And we have been doing this for the last 2.5 months to make it happen today. So I also welcome our dean in absentia, who takes a medicine, so that only you carry on. I will just join you anytime after that. So I welcome you also in absentia. I welcome the faculty, professors and ex-deans, Professor Anju Sharan Upadhyay ji, who has been professor in political science and head of the department, also the former dean of the school of the Faculty of Social Sciences. In this, I welcome Professor Vrinda Paranjape, who also been the former dean and professor of history. I welcome Professor Mallikarjun Joshi, who is a person from the science background, but he has a lot of interest in this field. So he has also welcome him. I welcome Professor Ghanshyam. I welcome Professor Singh. I welcome the dignitaries, Professor Anshuman, Professor Pulshekar from Goa and Hyderabad University. I welcome Professor Keshav Misra from the History Department. And I also welcome the delegates who have come from not only from India, but also from abroad, from South, from North. There are more than 180 paper presentation going to happen in the coming 3 days. I welcome them all. And I welcome all the guests and the students of MCPR and others. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now request Professor Priyankar Upadhyay to felicitate the Vice Chancellor, Professor Ajit Chaturvedi. Priyankar sir is the UNESCO Chair for Peace and Intercultural Understanding. And we have our Honorable Vice Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University. Thank you, sir. I would thank you, sir. I would now request Professor Manoj Kumar Mishra, Coordinator, Malviya Center for Peace Research, to please felicitate our keynote speaker for the inaugural session, Professor Samir Kumar Das, former Vice Chancellor, University of North Bengal. Thank you, sir. I would now request Professor Priyankar Upadhyay, the UNESCO Chair for Peace and Intercultural Understanding, to come and present the theme of the conference. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Samprita. Um, it's a delight to have so many of us around, especially our Vice Chancellor. And thinking about him, uh, it came to me that during my almost 4 decades plus experience of this university as a faculty, as a teacher, as an assistant professor and professor, we never had a Vice Chancellor who was so open to mingle. And mingle is the word that is synonymous with peace because he mingles easily, he goes everywhere, and I think that is something that brings him very close to the concept of peace, because it is anonymity, not meeting, that kind of creates that prejudice, and conflict begins. So anyway, thank you so much for being with us. And of course, to all the other members, Manoj has already welcomed. Incidentally, I'm not a visitor, Manoj, here. I belong to Banaras. I have my home and workplace here. So it's been all my colleagues are here. So great. And of course, the distinguished scholars and visitors from various parts of India, ranging from Goa, Calcutta, Srinagar, Hyderabad, and name a few, and my very, other distinguished colleagues, my old friend, Professor Joshi, who has served as the director of Institute of Science and avid interest in social sciences, which should not be seen as a contradiction, actually. So much to share, but time is short as always. But I feel so reassured and kind of optimistic seeing such a gathering talking about peace today. Especially this, I mean, in the annals of my awareness and memory, I have never come across such a dreadful time when it comes to threats to peace and unprecedented, unprecedented surge of war, violence, and loss of life. You name any continent, any subcontinent, any country, even our own subcontinent has issues that one thinks that could have been resolved easily if we had followed the preachings and teachings of all these sages, seers, and wonderful ideas that emanated in this country and abroad. But this is where we stand. And today, we are at a point of human civilization where, if we go by the latest atomic scientist, and they have just moved the doomsday clock to 85 seconds to midnight, which is closest ever to catastrophe. So the threat of a complete annihilation, and I don't have to enlighten and tell you about how devastating is the arsenal, the capacity to destroy this civilization, I think more than several thousand times, if not 100. But that's what we are, and that's where I feel reassured. We still have people who think about peace. One of the common notions that we have on the parlance, अरे peace से क्या होगा? जवाब दो. अब बुद्धा ने क्या कहा, गांधी ने क्या कहा, हमारे अपने मालवीय जी ने क्या कहा, that all goes to that is sideline. But we want to teach lessons, and without naming and going political, let's try and believe in optimism of will, although intellectually one is so pessimistic. I mean, look at the United Nations. It has never felt so helpless. I mean, I have the occasion last 15 years to be an integral part of the way the Secretary General and Security Council and General Assembly have been trying their hard level best to bring about that sanity, the peace building in the world. But today, United Nations is just forgotten. In fact, it is likely to be replaced. Without naming the great people who have brought this world to this kind of calamity, let's talk about pedagogies. This is not about a political lamentation. So let's see what is the background of peace education and where we have gone so far. So peace education, I would say, is no longer optional. It is urgent, and it is also evolving. The problem in academic parlance is that we still don't believe that peace is something that can be taught and researched. And that is an irony, and that is also something that defies our, it kind of reflects a myopic vision. I mean, long years back, to cut the story in very short in one sentence, after the devastation of Second World War, it was UNESCO who made this classic remark, the preamble of UNESCO, that since the wars begin in the minds of humans, although that time they said men, but now women are equally partner, in fact, more a partner. Since the wars begin in the minds of human, it is in the minds of human that defenses of peace should be built. And this logic led to peace education in many ways. And remarkable achievements were made. Some of them, the Delores report, I mean, the huge, amount of literature that was generated in India also, and I'll talk about it, and also abroad. The Delores report, named Learning to Live Together, way back, it insisted that this is the most core and crucial point of education today. Then recently, and I will encourage each one of us to just Google it and find it. They're online, all available without in a split of a second. The UNESCO recommendation on education for peace and sustainable development. I was a part of this exercise, and one of the final meetings were held in Bangkok. It's a beautiful document which was adopted once again by the 194 countries, and it addresses issues like climate change, inequality, digital literacy, and human rights, etc., etc. The problem is that peace education remains on the sideline of the not only in this country but elsewhere. The strategic studies, security studies, the defense studies, the bombardment studies, you name it, and they get all the attention and funding. Anyway, so one of the solid recommendation of this UNESCO recommendation, which was adopted by India. In fact, India was one of the leading countries which steered this particular recommendation, was that teacher empowerment, because trained, supported teachers are the frontline builders of peaceful, inclusive classrooms. The first lessons of peace building is learned by young students in the classroom, and teacher empowerment and direction in that. So that is the concept. Incidentally, our own NEP has very strongly advocated this whole concept of conflict prevention and peace education, and also a very strong emphasis on global citizenship education. Once again, I was part of, in fact, I drafted this whole thing for UGC. It was circulated to all universities couple of years. In fact, we have not taken very strong note of it. So this is the general context. Very quickly, it's about pedagogies. My argument is that we need to be aware, because we have professors and teachers from perhaps all institutions that teach peace studies in different ways, whether part of international relations or otherwise, or separately. We have to see the progression of peace education. Peace studies was not a regular subject, like so many other subjects were not a regular subject a few decades ago, like gender studies, environmental studies. So peace studies, uh, it was began in 1960s. The calamity of Vietnam War, that was the start point. That peace studies and research as a regular course began, and then came, this was 60s, lighting a small candles of compassion, care, and concern in post-war nuclear-ridden world. Then 70s, the questions were raised that what if conflict isn't the enemy? What if the real danger is how badly we handle it? We started acknowledging that conflict is not problematic. It is how we handle it. Conflicts are normal, and in fact, it's celebration of a living and a democratic society. We need conflict management king. Then 80s conflict resolution, identifying the root cause of the conflict. Unless you go to the generic causes of the conflict, you cannot do any about it. Then, of course, came conflict transformation, which brought religious and spiritual insights into it. And one of the proponents, John F. Lettrock, he borrowed heavily from Indian traditions, and still we kind of violence. entirely from Banaras, and Mr. Vice Chancellor sitting on the river bank of Varanasi. And we just lost him 3 years back, Samir. But he the structural violence, and he says that just one line: hate the sin, not the sinner. That was the start point of structural violence. So internationally, a lot of ideas were happening: conflict transformation, and then critical peace studies, which Professor Samir Das and his group is taking forward, asking uncomfortable questions: whose peace are we selling? Who benefits from silence? Peace was exposed hiding behind polite words. The idea was, we don't want a piece of graveyard. We want peace, a vibrant peace. So this was happening. 2015, finally the United Nations came out with a stunning idea that peace is nothing but aggregation of all 17 sustainable development goals. You have hunger, you have poverty, you have other issues, climate, and the 16, goal 16 relates to all the goals together. So, this new concept, the peace building has been overhauled, replaced, or enriched with a new concept, which I will ask especially the young student researchers to take note of, and that is sustaining peace. It's not sustainable peace, sustaining peace, which argues that peace in the absence of development, sustainable development, and justice will not stand too long. So you bring it all together. So, what are we doing here? Some suggestions, and that is how, with the help of Manoj, Ajay, Prashant, and Sunita ji, if she's around, we sat together and we said, let's throw new ideas, especially among the young scholars and researchers, and and also talk about what is happening in a couple of minutes, and then I'm done. I have my 10 minutes. First is, of course, the critical and post-colonial approaches. I mean, how do we decolonize curricula? That is, I think, everything we all have been saying for long, that Western intellectual hegemony has to be fought. But how do we fight it? Should we ignore all the good things, even those people who have borrowed ideas from him, scientific temper of mind and all? So these are the questions which we need to, uh, uh, interrogate, especially the Western-centric models confronting global structural inequalities. Then, of course, the linking of peace building and sustainable development. How do we do it? We talk about it, but how do we in practice do it? Like the master's course that we introduce here in this center, we named it as conflict management and development. Because if development is a process of change, conflict is a part of it. So it was not euphoric, it was practical about everyday life. And then the most important thing that draws most strength or most inspiration in our own Malviya Center for Peace Research, and that is local turn. This is a term which is now used internationally as a challenge to liberal peace building, Western liberal peace building. We have to privilege indigenous traditions over imposed liberal peace building. And attached to that is the idea of using religion and interreligious understanding, borrowing from people like the great sages like Vivekanand in Chicago Address, wherein he says that I don't believe in tolerance, I believe in acceptance of all religion, to that an extent, and bridging science and spiritualism together. So these new ideas are coming up. Then, of course, the digital and youth led innovations, digital designs for peace, is something that we have organized earlier, a couple of workshops here and elsewhere where I work for this thing. So the endless, and so these are not theories, they are lived responses. Schools in war zones, keeping learning alive, classroom, introducing critical topics, and all these things we have to bring together. We have come together to explore, to critique, and co create. So, welcome again to this wonderful seminar. We are going to just focus on pedagogies, how we teach, what new we should teach, and what to learn from our own experiences. Thank you very much. I exceeded my time, I can see. Apologies.
Thank you very much, sir, for your kind words. And yes, we have taken the note of sustaining peace. And moving ahead, now for the keynote address, I would like to call Professor Samir Kumar Das, former Vice Chancellor, University of North Bengal. Thank you.
Professor Chaturvedi, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Banaras Hindu University, Professor Upadhyay, UNESCO Chair for Peace and Intercultural Understanding, Professor Mishra, Coordinator, MCPR, dignitaries of the dais, colleagues, scholars, and students, and I don't know if there are members of the press. I have to begin with a word of thanks to Malviya Peace Research, Malviya Center for Peace Research, and UNESCO Chair for Peace and Intercultural Understanding for having given me this precious opportunity of sharing what I still consider as some of my unfolding and uncut ideas. And it's forums like this that I can toss around certain ideas and can fathom the questions and can learn from you. Uh, this is a very difficult time, as highlighted by Professor Priyankar and Professor Mishra. We live in a world of uncertainties, uncertainties of all kinds. I will draw your attention to only a few of them. One is, of course, war, and that's not just one war which is being fought, but there are a series of wars getting entangled, and there is already the apprehension that all these wars might culminate in one single war, the Third World War. But I will talk less about the war because this is a much talked about subject. The second source of uncertainty is climate extremities. So you have, for instance, I can give you one anecdotal example. One of my relatives was in Morocco very recently, and Morocco was passing through floods and rains. I saw a newspaper headline in a Moroccan newspaper which says years of drought and then hours of rain, and hours of rain which are so compressed that the downpour actually floods a good part of Morocco. The UNESCO document on peace education, which was published in, I guess I'm very bad at remembering the dates, but this was published sometime in 22 or might be 23, which actually says that 250 million people to 1.2 billion people are going to be displaced by the year 2050 as a result of climate changes. And the world can do nothing about it. This is almost inevitable. That's the second source of uncertainty. The third is, of course, the not just climate uncertainties, but the third is the precarity of labor. The nature of labor has changed. Already a term has come into circulation which is called precariat, uh, which is a closer version of proletariat, precariat. So all these taken together creates a world of uncertainties. I would rather prefer to use the phrase world of uncertainties rather than anything else. And of course, the almost every now and then, you know, that we get the SMS which says that our battle against COVID is still on, which means that pandemic, which is unprecedented. In fact, I did a little bit of research on the history of pandemics in India. We are told that there was Spanish influenza 100 years back. But then I saw absolutely no trace of news report on Spanish influenza, excepting two or three. I read all the newspapers, national newspapers as well as Bangla newspapers, but I found hardly any trace of it in it. Maybe that the information was not flowing in. Now that information flow has eased up, so you have all the notes, you have World Health Organization, which actually gives you the figures, the real time figures. More than 70 lakh people have officially lost their lives as a result of COVID, which is unprecedented in human history, unanticipated, and we are not prepared for it. So there is a distinction between uncertainty and risk. Risk can be anticipated. You can calculate risk. There are metrics of calculating risks, mathematical models. But on the other hand, uncertainty is unpredictable, unanticipated, and takes you by surprise. So that's the reason why I would prefer the term uncertainty, and I would also prefer the prefix world of uncertainties, because all these uncertainties coagulate, come together, and develop a synergy of their own, which actually increases, multiplies the extent of uncertainty manifold. I give you an example from my own ethnography. It's yet to be completed, but it's a very telling ethnography of a person who is a very pretty old man. He says that I lost my home 3 times. Never I could return to the same home in my life. I lost my home when partition happened. I lost my home twice when my home was washed away by the river Brahmaputra. And this is an ethnography from Assam. And you know that the river changes its course, which is thanks to climate change, which is another story. So it's not simply that uncertainties come together in the life of one. I will raise the question, have we learned to live with uncertainties? Human life has for peace. Nowadays, also in UNESCO circles, and Priyanka will correct me if I'm wrong, right to life is also given with a suffix, right to live. No right to life without peace. And peace is probably the prerequisite for, for right to life. Um, and a life without peace is no life at all. That's how a life which is plunged into unpredictable and immense uncertainties, incredible uncertainties, is no life worth living for. We are not like basal animals. So we live a life which has to be meaningful for us, for all of us. In other words, the uncertainties are entangled in a very complex manner, which poses a threat to peace. And it is for this reason I would say, because you know that we're looking for an agenda for peace research in future, I would say that probably this is the time when we need to foreground right to life at the center of peace research. Uh, and I would welcome researchers, I would welcome your feedback on this question. I would say two things now, and then I will conclude. Uh, One thing is this, that I'm talking about right to life, not security of life. Because the security of life, the whole question of security of life presupposes that there is insecurity. There is no question of security unless there is insecurity. The insecurity does what? Insecurity is an emergent situation. So suppose you hear of an accident, road accident, for instance, in a nearby locality, what do? You avoid that road. So our emergency response to insecurity is avoidance. We don't take emergency situation squarely on our own. We don't try to confront them. And in the name of insecurity, you know that life comes increasingly under surveillance. Um, UNESCO data once again shows, it actually cites data from acquired from other platforms. It says, for instance, that during COVID, there has been 72% increase in the autocracies around the world during COVID. So it's basically between 2020 and 2022. But similar data will be corroborated by many other platforms, but UNESCO quotes it, the document which I have cited. So we are talking about right to life, not securitization of life. A life which is not under the scanner, under surveillance. That's one part. The second thing which I would mention in this context is, are we talking about right to life? Or what kind of right to life is all about? Is it like any other right? By the way, Constitution of India recognizes right to life as inalienable, as a fundamental right. Article 21 of the Constitution, for instance, says uh, guarantees right to life. Um, Now, and the court, if you look at the legal history, we don't have time actually to go into the legal history. I became interested in researching on 20 court cases, which is still a project with Jodhpur Law School, which is continuing, but I can't share the data because there's no time. The overall judicial response to Article 21 has been to expand the ambit of it. So you have right to food, right to education, considered as integral part of right to life. If you do not have food, then what is the meaning of your right to life? These are the questions which are being asked. But I would raise a very fundamental question, which in fact Hannah Arendt once raised, which is this, that right to life, in fact, is to be considered as right to have rights. In other words, in order to claim rights, uh, you have first of all to live, to survive. To survive in order to be able to claim your rights. And that's why Hannah Arendt said that right to life is actually the right to have rights. It's a first order right, so that you get entitled to second order rights, like right to education, right to freedom of movement. You have all the rights which have been so nicely enumerated in the chapter on fundamental rights, and also elsewhere. Not that, I mean, the chapter on fundamental rights is not an exhaustive document. There are many other kinds of rights which are guaranteed by law of the land in our country, also guaranteed by the case laws. from time to time. Um, Hannah Arendt makes this point in her famous book called Origins of Totalitarianism. She was actually referring to two interesting cases. One is Hitler's Germany, and the other is uh, Stalin's Russia, Stalin's Soviet Union. And she makes this point that the fear was so total that even the widows who lost their husbands in the hands of the state would confess that they had ever married in the first place. And that's the reason why she uses the term totalitarianism. It is in that context that she raises this question of right to have rights. And of course, she refers to how Jews, for instance, 6 million Jews were butchered in different parts of Europe, particularly in Germany. But again, I would say that that doesn't justify what Israel has been doing in Gaza or what Israel has been doing elsewhere. That's another terrain of thought. I don't think that we need to go into the details of that. But in that context, she says, and Arendt very poignantly argues, that until and unless you become part of a nationality, these are her words, or an organized community, either you belong to a nationality or a community, you cannot have your right to rights. Your life will not have any meaning. I have written on pandemic, and probably in another forum organized by the Malviya Center, I mentioned it in the context of the pandemic, that in the context of the pandemic, where, for instance, government's reach was limited because India is a very vast country, and like I said, that pandemic actually has taken us by surprise. I wanted to resolve the mystery that where per thousand hospital bed is one of the lowest in the states of the northeastern India, which I work on. But then fatality rate and infectivity is one of the lowest in India. So how could this miracle happen? Or for instance, take the example of Dharavi in Mumbai, where people are forced to live cheek by jowl. But why is it that infectivity is so low? And fatality rate is one of the lowest. Dharavi model. One reason, and I would say one reason amongst many, is perhaps this, that because there were people solidarities. And I was interested in underlining what are the modules of solidarity which could develop during the pandemic. And in one instance, I have a number of instances. Because time is short, and I will end up with this example. Some unidentified chords which associate one with the other. Do I have just 1 minute? 1 or 1.5 minutes. Now, coming to education, because it's a on peace pedagogy. Now, I was trying to find out that how is right to life to be taught and to be learned as well. And I reread Rousseau's Emile. And Rousseau says that minimal interference, let the child learn what life is in the hard way. So it is only when the child, for instance, puts its hand on fire that you stop the child. Otherwise, let it do whatever it wants. Minimal interference. But on the other hand, you have another system of education. Indigenous knowledge becomes very, very relevant here. Swami Vivekananda's name has already been mentioned. Also, you can mention the name of Tagore, who would argue that the greatest education is how you can associate yourself with others. And this solidarity during the pandemic, and solidarity may happen in any of the emergency situations, is an example of exactly what Swami Vivekananda was talking about. Maybe that these people never read Swami Vivekananda, but that doesn't mean that's the lived experience. We learn through living. We not only learn in classrooms, the world itself is a classroom. So, in that sense, we have a lot to learn from indigenous knowledge. There are many others also, indigenous systems of medicine, social distancing, for instance, is not unknown in amongst the tribals of Arunachal Pradesh. So, with these few words, I don't know whether I could make sense, but I tossed around some outlines of a probable agenda of peace research for the future and pedagogies that I once again thank Malviya Center, UNESCO Chair, and all of you for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It is indeed in these uncertain times that we need solidarities and various models of solidarities. With that in mind, I would now like to invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Ajit Kumar Chaturvedi, for his kind remarks. Thank you.
Professor Sameer Das, Professor Priyanka Upadhyay, Professor Manoj Kumar Mishra, several of my colleagues sitting in the audience, students, delegates who have come to attend this 3-day event. Then it will be good. In today's times, early times, so many things can be talked about peace. And just like you all, I also have few thoughts which I want to share with you all. I remember my time as a child going to school. Sometimes he would read newspapers or listen to the news coming on the radio. Would be devoted to strikes. There is a strike in this organization, there is a dispute in this organization, uh, railways is on strike, uh, this office, that office, there's so much discontent. People are feeling that their rights are not being recognized. But over a period of time, I can see a very distinct decline in such kind of things, at least in the national news. I'm talking about domestic. I'm not talking about the international stage, and I'm not talking of the problems alluded to by Professor Upadhyay and Professor Das. I'm talking of the Indian society, um, the way judiciary has evolved, the way our constitution was structured, and how over a period of time with the help of the Indian Constitution, the judiciary has played more and more interventionist role. As a result, lot of pain points, lot of feelings of insecurity or being deprived or being discriminated, they have significantly reduced. And what has happened is that we don't see a lot of rail roko, rasta roko, traffic being blocked. I'm not saying it is zero, saying there is a significant decline. And then when I see at some place, so original demand is gone. So I mean, people over a period of time realize that this strategy is not working. It is not paying. And also, so what I would say is that the problems at the global scale or the macro scale agenda, that somehow that I need to do a few things. I'm doing those few things. These are Do you remember that? Said, what is work to rule agitation? Why should work as per the rule? Why is this an agitation? Then he explained to me that the rules are so outdated that they will start creating discomfort to the people. So change the rules. Of course, now it is not happening. I mean, I don't see any of these things happening. So on one hand, there is good hope that we have learned, but at the same time, there is a sense of urgency has to be seen amongst the intellectuals sitting here. That okay, think about the global stage, but please don't forget the microscopic stage, and make a difference there. That will give more.
I would also request ma'am to kindly give the vote of thanks because it was under her teamship that the center was established.
Get credit for it.
And please.
Thank you, Samrikta. Thank you very much for bringing me from amidst the distinguished audience to Global Fellow Peace Research Institute, and also perhaps in the capacity
Photograph? Should I take it?